Hi everyone, quick intro to this new video, which is going to be about backing up and restoring a standalone server. In other words, a server that might be in a Homelab rather than a clustered setup. Now originally I did this video, I tried to cover both of them. It ended up being far too long, and I realized the objectives were quite different between recovering from a standalone disaster and a cluster disaster. For instance, in a standalone, you've probably got, let's say, 10 virtual machines. I don't know, more than that possibly, but probably 10 or less for most people. And also, you don't have the pressure that you have in trying to restore a production cluster. So you can actually just restore the machines one by one in an order that is convenient for you. Bring back the one that's most important to you first, and then sort the others out afterwards. So the idea of this is, I don't have a fancy NAS, I don't have remote storage, which is highly available. So I want to be able to be reasonably confident that should my node explode, I can get it back in a reasonably timely fashion. Okay, so that's the objective. I've actually recorded this days after I recorded the rest of this video. So if you see the fact that I've had a haircut, there's been some, one or two other changes that would explain it. So let's get on with it. Right, let's start the ball rolling by doing a backup of a single node. This is a standalone server, Transam in our example, and we're going to do a backup of this single node, and then later on we're going to have a disaster, and we're going to have to try and recover everything. We're going to assume we've got no remote storage, and we're actually going to back up to a stick. Here's one I prepared earlier. It's a 64 gigabyte stick, so we're going to use that for our backup. So let's just remind ourselves. Well, in fact, I've actually taken Transam out of the cluster. Otherwise, this procedure wouldn't make a lot of sense, because we'd be backing up a single node that was a member of a cluster, and therefore doesn't really demonstrate what it's like to do this process. So what I'm going to do is type dmesg -w, which is -w is for watch or follow. So what happens is it gives us our last messages, and then if we just hit return a few times to clear the screen, when we plug in our USB stick, we will find out what is the device name, and in this case it's /dev/sdb, but you need to be sure. So now let's run some form of command to actually format partition this disk. So let's run a gdisk, gdisk/dev/sdb, and it comes up and tells us it's found a valid GPT partition. That's a global partition table, and we can do question mark, by the way. If you're not familiar with these commands, question mark will give you the available commands. So let's do a P for print the partition table. And because this is a brand new stick, actually I'm lying, it's not really, but still, because we're pretending it's a brand new stick, it has no partitions. So let's create a partition, which is N for add a new partition, and let's just take all the defaults. So we just keep hitting enter. So that was nice. And now when we do P, we find that the entire stick, all 57 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes, let's not go there. Maybe for another day, that discussion. But anyway, 57. We have a 64 gig partition, and so now gdisk doesn't actually update the USB stick immediately. So the nice thing about that is you can do things on a disk or a stick. It's not until you actually hit W for write that anything changes, and then it sort of says, "Are you sure you're going to destroy any data that's already on there?" And I'm going to say yes. So it's writing a new partition table, so that's fine. And if we look into /dev/sdb, we'll see we've now got sdb1, which is our new partition. Okay, clear the screen. So now we need to put a file system on there. So we can do an mkfs, and we need to specify the type of file system. So I'm going to just choose ext4, which is the kind of typical Debian preferred file system type. There are many types of file system. You could use XFS and many others, but again, let's not get sidetracked. So let's put a ext4 file system on /dev/sdb1, and it had, yeah, I did admit that it wasn't a brand new stick. It has been used before, but it's now creating a file system on /dev/sdb1. Now that means we can now mount it. So mount /dev/sdb1 onto /a. So we now have a directory called /a, which is, if we do a df-h of /a, size 57 gig, 64 gigabytes, 57 gigabyte file system, which is pretty much empty. Okay, so that's under /a, so that's fine. So now we want to use that for our backups. This is a stick we're going to back up our virtual machines to, and our configuration and various files that we feel would be useful for us to keep a copy of. Okay, so we need to tell Proxmox about this. So we go to Data Center, Storage, okay, and we'll see that we've got two default storages that will always be there. So we've got local LVM, which is where our virtual machines and containers would be stored locally. And we've got our local directory, which is where backups, ISO images and things like that are stored. This is just a convention that Proxmox have. But we need to add some storage, and we're going to add a directory. We'll call it backups. The directory is /a. And what are we going to store on it? Well, the only thing we're going to store on it is backups. So I've just chosen backup, and it's now appeared. So we have a directory called backup, mounted on /a. Right, so if we now go to our virtual machines, which are currently running, by the way, and if we go to backup, okay, if we make sure we've got backups chosen in the top right-hand side of the screen, can you see that? Yes, you can. And we're going to say backup now. So we're going to backup, we can put in a comment, or notes, but in fact, we basically can just go with all the defaults. Okay, so we go backup. I'll probably truncate this so that you don't sit here watching grass grow. I will come back when it's complete. There you go. So we now have backed up 103. So let's now do 104. Click on, again, check that we're on backups and click on backup now. Go with all the defaults, which are fine. And again, I'll pause for a second. Okay. So that is now completed. If we look at this, by the way, it says that it's backed up 32 gigabytes or gigabytes of 32 gigabytes. So if you take these two virtual machines, 64 gigabytes, they both got 32 gigabyte virtual disks. That's actually larger than the stick. So how does that work? Well, it's because they use thin provisioning, which means that the backups are only of the data that has changed since the virtual machine was created. Whoops, sorry. So the virtual machine was created with a 32 gigabyte virtual disk. We then installed Ubuntu on it. We've updated them, etc., etc. So when we come out of here and actually look, the actual backup size is 2.44 gigabytes. It isn't actually 32 gig. However, yeah, so that's fine. So we actually have two backups of roughly 3 gig each. So we've used 6 gig of our 64 gig stick, so we're fine. Okay. So if we go and look at the storage called backups, we can now see we've got 2 backups, which are our latest backups. We might have more than 2, of course. We might have previous days backups, or backups before we made a major change and after we made a major change, etc., etc. As long as we've got space on that stick, we can keep creating backups of this virtual machine. So that's our backups. We now have those backups. So if we go across to our terminal, and if we clear the screen, and if we cd into /a, we'll find there is a directory called dump. And in dump, we can see our backups. Okay, so those are actually our compressed backups. So far, so good. So now what we want to do is copy anything we think would help us recover this machine. So to start with, let's copy a few files, copy etc. hosts, copy /etc/network, /interfaces. We might have a complex network configuration. Well, of course we could recreate it, but we maybe can't remember exactly how we set it up. and any other files that you might find useful. And where do we copy them? Copy them to the current directory. Right, next we need to actually recover, back up our database. Now, we could stop the cluster software running. Okay, I know it's standalone, but remember, standalone servers they're still controlled by a system D process or service known as PVE-cluster. We could stop that, and that would shut the database down, but we don't actually have to. There is a command within SQLite which, if given the name of the database, which is pv-cluster config.db, and then given the command .backup, that's a SQLite command, and then given the name of a file we'd like to back up to, config.db.back, for instance, just to remind us this is a backup, we can simply do a backup, and this will effectively take a snapshot of the database and then back up the snapshot, which means the database can continue running. Please note the quotes here. This is a single argument to the SQLite command, but because it has a space in it, you need to quote it to make it a single argument. So we do that command, which takes no time at all. We do a file of star, and we see that we've got a config.db.back, which is an SQLite database backup, so to speak. It's actually effectively the backup. It's the same file as config.db. So there you go. We now have created a backup scenario. Right, so we could now unmount /a and actually put it in a drawer somewhere. So let's actually do that. Let's cd out the way. Let's do a umount of /a. Wait for it to finish, because obviously it has to flush any data onto the stick. Then unplug the stick, and there you go. There's our backup. We put it in our secure location, so or take it off-site in case our house burns down. No, hopefully that's not the disaster we're going to have. If it is, this is probably the last thing we're going to be worried about. All right, so we now have a full backup, which we're going to use a little bit later to actually recover Transam as a standalone node. Okay, as you can see, I'm now over on the web user interface for Transam, which has been completely reinstalled as a standalone but completely fresh install. So it's not part of a cluster, and it hasn't yet been recovered. So that's our mission. Let's recover it. So if we go across to a terminal and SSH as root at Transam, I haven't copied any keys across from my Mac, so I actually have to put the password in, and we're now on Transam. So next we want to actually use our stick. Okay, so I haven't got an alias for clear, so I actually have to type it in full. So we now need to mount this stick in the same way that we previously did. Now it's going to be /dev/sdb, almost certainly, but again, just to be on the safe side, we should probably do -w, hit new line a few times, and then plug in the stick just to confirm that it is actually /dev/sdb. In fact, it's even telling us there is a partition, sdb1. So we can now quit out of that. We can make a directory /a, because it's a brand new install, that won't exist. And we can mount /dev/sdb1 onto /a. Clear screen. Oh gosh. Actually, let me just do an alias. C equals clear -x. I'll leave you to look up what the -x does. And now let's do a df -ht ext4. And we can see, well, our actual root file system is ext4, but also we have /a. And if we go into /a and have a look what's in there, we can see we've got the files that we previously backed up, config.db.back, the dump directory, which contains backups of our 2 virtual machines, and some other information, whatever it was we chose to actually to save, which is great. Now we have on our stick, because remember I'm in /a, I switch back to /a, our config.db.back, and we'd like to restore from that. Now what we should do for the restore, because otherwise we're going to confuse Proxmox, is do system ctl stop pve-cluster. Okay, and that will actually stop Proxmox effectively. So Proxmox is now no longer running, and if we do an ls of slash etc slash pve, we'll actually find that it's empty because we've stopped the PVE cluster software. So now we can actually restore our original database from config.db.back. So we run SQL-like command as previously, but with a slightly different subcommand. So we want to first of all specify the database name, and it's pve-cluster, and then it's config.db. Then we want to give the command, which this time is .restore, rather predictably, and we want to specify where it is we want to restore from, and we called it .config.db.back, close quote, hit enter, and it immediately restored it. So now we can do recover our stop command and change it to start. And then we can also do status just to make sure it did actually start correctly. And it claims to be running fine. Okay, so that's good news. So we log in, click OK. Now when we look at Transam, notice it's actually suddenly decided it has got 2 virtual machines, but they're not going to work because we do have virtual machines. But if we look at the hardware, okay, our virtual machine disks are stored on local-LVM, and the problem with that is that storage does not have the virtual disks in it. If we go there and have a look under virtual disks, there are none. Rather predictably, obviously. So what are we going to do? So we're going to go to data center, we're going to go to storage, and we're going to add a directory storage, which we will call backups. It doesn't actually matter that the name is the same or not. And we're going to specify /a again. So we're going to say add /a as a directory entry. And that's now appeared here. And if we go there and click under, oh, I beg your pardon, I made a mistake. I didn't add to there the fact that it has backups on it. Backup. In fact, it doesn't have any disk images. Okay. So we now have our backups with the correct value in there. So if we now go to backups, and this time look under backups, we find we've got our 2 machines. By the way, you might have 20 machines, same story. Okay, so we click on one of the machines. I'm just picking the lower number 1 first, and I'm going to say that I would like to restore that, okay? But the best way to do that is actually to go into VM03, go to backup, and notice it's found its backup here, because we've just attached /a, and we can now say restore. Okay, and it will basically, if you leave all the defaults, it will come back exactly as it was previously. So let's do a restore. Okay, it says it's going to destroy the current VM. Well, fair enough, there's nothing in the current VM, so we go yes. This will take a second. It didn't take long, but it's from a USB stick, so it took time. So that's Ubuntu 03 hopefully restored. So if we go to the console and click on Start Now, in fact, it's going to start. Now we'll come back to that in a second and just check that it did start correctly. Let's now go to Ubuntu 04 and go to backups, click on Ubuntu 04, click on restore, accept all the defaults, and again, yes, we would like to restore it, and again, I'll pause it for a second. So now it has actually completed the restore. I'm just waiting for it to say task OK, and there you go, task OK. So back at the console, we can click on Start Now, and that should succeed, and it looks like it's going to. So we can nip back to Ubuntu 03, make sure that started okay, which it has done. I'll actually log in just to prove everything seems okay. And we can check it's actually on the network, and it's fine. It is back. Ubuntu 04, we go there, and in fact that has also started. So we've restored our 2 virtual machines. And we've restored any configuration information for Proxmox that, for instance, something that we probably wouldn't do on a standalone system, but we might have a number of users, for instance. We've only got one at the moment, but we could have created users. We could have created groups of machines to categorize them. We could have given our users roles. In other words, we could restrict what they're allowed to do. And if because we backed up config.db, all of those settings will have returned, making our life a lot easier. Of course, we could reconfigure it, but we might not be able to remember what we did originally. So I hope that was an interesting process, recovering from everything. I apologize if some of the editing of that previous 10 minutes or so was pretty aggressive, but my intention was to cover this standalone server reinstall fairly briefly. And then in the cluster reinstall, which is obviously a trifle more complex, hopefully we can include a lot more detail. So even if you have a standalone server, you might still find it interesting to watch the next video that's coming out very shortly. Thanks for your patience. Please do subscribe. Please do leave messages asking me to do different things, commenting on the videos, whatever, saying hello, and see you soon.